Welcome to Internal Affairs of the Mind, where we don't chase trends, but we chase the truth, where reflection is weaponized and reality's got no place to hide. Some people preach, some people pretend. Me, I investigate. I'm Greg Thompson, a retired cop with over 2 decades experience, but a lifelong investigator. And now, a full-time interrogator of the human condition. This isn't therapy. It's not philosophy class. It's an investigation into everything they told you not to question and everything you told yourself you didn't have time to. Let's crack today's case. Let's chop it up. Okay, so last investigation, we cracked open the noise in our programming. Today, we're going after the biggest break-in of all. I believe race, not racism, but the very idea of race is the longest running case of identity theft in human history. It started with a lie and it's disguised as truth. So today's conversation isn't about hate and it's definitely not about denying racism because that's a byproduct. This conversation will be about the invention of race itself and its uses to this day, a concept not built to describe us, but to divide us. Now, in case you're fully committed to accepting the propaganda, let me clarify. Race was manufactured, fabricated, then institutionalized. And once that happened, it stopped being just a theory. It became policy. It became fact. And ultimately, it was weaponized. You ever think about how identity can be stolen? Not just financially, but personally, psychologically, even culturally. Most of us equate identity theft to someone hacking your credit card, stealing your social security number. But what would you say if I suggested the first case of identity theft wasn't from your wallet, but from your mind? What if race itself, the label that got stamped on us from the moment we were born, wasn't your identity, but your initial programming? A construct, a false label on our birth certificate that's been calling the shots ever since. Now, I know that's going to rub people raw, but today's conversation is not about comfort. It's about confronting a lie most likely all of us were handed and never questioned. Let's be clear, this wasn't some accidental mishap. Race wasn't just an idea, it was manufactured, written in ink, and secured in blood. How, you ask? Okay, good place to start. In 1705, Virginia slave codes didn't just define who could be owned, they lawfully defined who was human. Black meant property, white meant power. Had nothing to do with culture or fact or science. It was legislation. And race was born as a social construct built on prejudices and ignorant assumptions that selected groups of humans are superior or inferior based solely on skin color. So I contend this is when the identity theft occurred, when law made skin color or race our label. So let's begin chopping it up right here. Do we accept the programming that our skin color alone automatically assigns us and those similar to us as having something in common, as if by default we're the same? Do we really need to buy in that those who look different are our natural enemy? Or could it be, just could it be, that someone benefits from us believing that? If race wasn't useful, would they still push it? Would every form we fill out still ask for it? Would every headline still lead with it? And would every political campaign still exploit it? The label of race is the easiest and most effective way to divide people while calling it diversity. If it is truly diversity, why are we trying to put everyone into so few boxes in the first place? Is it because it's profitable? Perhaps it's because if we can be convinced those different from us are our enemy, we'll never look for the real threat. Keep the masses confused and at conflict while the architects keep designing. Remember? Sheep. Of course, someone benefits. When we stay fighting in color coded corners, we don't have time or stamina to ask bigger questions about policy, about status, about power. That confusion, that division, it's currency for politicians, for corporations, definitely for the media, or for the culture vultures selling us our identity or which identity to accept. Listen, I've worn a badge, I've been in rooms where policy was shaped, I've seen firsthand how division can occur because of flawed data. So, this episode will seek to be about reclaiming our stolen identity, not the one society says we are, but who we really and actually are. It will be about challenging the labels they use to define us and how those labels are used erroneously, and ultimately about reclaiming the version of ourselves we were intended to be before we were given the script. Because I think once we recognize and accept how and why race was invented and that it is inherently flawed, we can start manufacturing something new, something more important: truth, our purpose, accountability, and perhaps real human connection. Malcolm X is one of my favorite figures in history, not just for what he fought for, but just as importantly, for how he evolved. From being probably the fiercest advocate for total racial separation to becoming a powerful voice for unity. And what changed him? Experience, truth. His pilgrimage to Mecca exposed him to a reality the US had kept concealed. People of every color praying together, breaking bread together, ultimately ignoring the physical differences of each other for a common cause. That kind of growth, that kind of courage, that makes him legendary because he refused to stay the same and was bold enough to change. So it was him who said, I believe in human beings and that all human beings should be respected as such, regardless of their color. And if today's topic of conversation makes you uncomfortable in any way, good. You probably have the most self reflecting to do. So let's move from the crime itself to the supporting evidence. I have tons of experience in this arena. I've been labeled black, white, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, all depending on who was doing the labeling. I've lived this confusion firsthand. I am the visual definition of racially ambiguous. So here's my concern. When race becomes data and that data becomes truth, we end up living inside a false system, one that tries to tell us who we are, and we claim it. During my years in law enforcement, I had access to almost every form of agency data: use of force reports, arrest stats, internal reviews. I spent a good portion of my time as the guy analyzing it, presenting it, and defending it. And that's where I really saw the flaw in my professional arena. The way race is used, the system and the people were inherently flawed. It was built and distributed on misidentification. Here's the truth I bet most of you have no clue about. Law enforcement agencies in general don't collect self identified race data. Officers assign it. They look at you, they pick a box. They don't ask, they assume. And then that assumption becomes official. Did you also know that no state in the US lists race on the driver's license for reference? You know, it's funny, several of you just did or will look at your license because you don't believe me. But what this means is based on physical appearance alone, another human being assigns your label. We just guess, and that guess becomes your official record. Now multiply that error across thousands of reports, across decades. Obviously, this begins a deep rabbit hole of inaccuracy for any data mined from this information. Now, we can suggest that this is perhaps due to human error or blame cops making bad choices, but that's a cop out. because the mislabeling isn't just an error in the choices made, it is much deeper rooted in the structural negligence of the labels in the first place. And don't get it twisted. This isn't just about law enforcement data. It's much more rampant than that. Listen, I've told you before, my agenda during these conversations is quite simple: introspection and self reflection in hopes of self correction. So let's talk about how this plays out in the streets. Here's a story that's real to me. Okay. My daughter was about 6 when she taught me the truth. We were trying to identify one of her classmates, a girl she called her best friend. That girl with the red shirt, she said. That didn't help me. Red shirt, black pants, daddy, she added. Still nothing. She had braids, black hair, and the pretty shoes. Finally, I asked, "Do you mean the little black girl?" She looked confused. "No, daddy. She's brown." That moment slapped me. My daughter, unprogrammed, uncorrupted, was more accurate than I was. She didn't label her friend by race. She described her, actually described her. I had accepted the programming. She hadn't yet. Not for 1 minute did the thought of identifying her friend from class as the black girl or the white girl or anything even related to race or her skin color even popped into her mind. With such simplicity, she exposed my ignorance. So here's our starting field assignment. I want you to ask yourself and honestly answer these questions. Do you allow room for the actual identity of a person outside of their physical label? You know, who they actually are, how they treat you, and how they behave. The shit that actually matters. When you see people or describe people to others, does your mind quickly assign race based on appearance to help better explain that person? And when you do, because you're lying if you say you don't, what information is that decision based on? Physical appearance, like skin color, perhaps? And after you do this, do you find yourself allocating other traits assigned to that person based on your choice? Maybe not verbally, but subconsciously running through stereotypes or characteristics of that group. You know, implicit bias. This is where the real fallout and problems surface if we don't begin to become more self aware. Because the labels we have created and continue to assign to identify people, it only perpetuates the division and the erroneous mass grouping of people on false descriptors and information. And let's be clear, the isms of the world, racism, genderism, classism, they all gain momentum because they are rooted in a belief in untrue assignments of identifying characteristics of a selected group of people. So, what is the fallout when mislabeling, whether ill intended or simply human error, is rampant? The consequence of this isn't just statistical, meaning flawed data leads to flawed conclusions, but it's also deeply spiritual because flawed conclusions lead to policy that misrepresents reality. Let me give you another example of where this plays out as a concern. There has been a deep dive nationwide about police use of force data, specifically as it pertains to race, and agencies are tasked with analyzing their use of force reports and producing statistical analysis of those numbers for distribution and interpretation. To accomplish this appropriately, I would need to use all use of force reports detailing the force used and the injuries that may have occurred. But just as important, if truly reviewing these forced instances and their occurrences more or less against a particular group of people, I would need the race of the offender. Stay with me now. So I compile 100 uses of force reports for an agency involving 100 offenders. Now I'll be very generous and say, what if 40 of those reports have mislabeled race choices for those offenders? In case you need a friendly reminder, because you think my number could be so badly off, your racially ambiguous host has been labeled white, black, Hispanic, and other, all by people who thought they knew just by looking. Now, amplify that 40% error rate nationwide and try to print me out an accurate report that can depict if there's a problem or not from that flawed data? Where is the value in potentially 40% inaccurate information in data used to make or revise policies and or identify potential deficits? You can scoff and dismiss it, call me exaggerated, but you can't deny the cracks in the foundation. In police work, we call this shit in, shit out. But when that shit is amplified, it becomes official stats used by local, state, and federal agencies, by media, and then ultimately by public opinion. We've built an entire narrative on faulty information. Can you not see the chaos in that? Hell, if we can't even properly define what we are actually measuring, how can we possibly identify a problem or ultimately begin to fix it? Yet we've built entire institutions, education, justice, media, on labels no one asked for, no one agreed to, and shit, no one even really fits. So, what the hell are we really upholding? Bottom line, race labels damn sure aren't the way. Now, I do know and definitely feel how race concerns and the huge divides that exist are obvious and seemingly growing worse. That's real, and I don't have the solutions. Yet, what I do know, and can never be convinced to believe otherwise, is that the labels and the division they cause are never going to provide answers. They are inherently causing further problems by utilizing flawed data to confuse the masses about one created group versus another. The overutilization of race data has created a division amongst people that continues to move the needle further and further away from any possible chance of unity. Everywhere you go today and need to fill out an application, there's a section dedicated to choosing your race. Like it's a badge of pride or something that actually identifies who we are. And hell, why do you need my race to complete a bank loan? I used to lose my shit when I heard someone come over the radio for a medical call and describe the patient because it would often sound something like this.
Units radio. Be advised, I have a Hispanic male, not conscious, not alert, shallow breathing. Start a signal 4, code 1.
Translation: Hispanic male needs help, send an ambulance, and tell them to drive really fast. So, why did that piss me off? Because what the hell did race have to do with saving his life? Will the ambulance respond differently? Will they bring different equipment to care for this man now that they know his label? For what reason whatsoever was the label of race necessary? Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not blaming the person that would have given that transmission because they did it unconsciously. Describing others using race has been coded in us as people, and we don't even recognize we do it. But for as long as I can remember, I've had real questions and problems with the actual intention of race information gathering and utilization, especially since I will always stand on the premise that it is useless in every possible context it is used. I personally don't feel pride or a sense of identity by being asked to select the box or all boxes that apply. Nor do I look at the selected box of another and make a more informed decision about anything. Hell, let's just look at the ever changing landscape of the categories from inception. The labels have changed way more than the people ever have in order to adapt to the new, desired programming. Ask yourself, because I still do, if they are even remotely fact driven as they are purported and accepted to be, why is there so much rebranding, redefining, and restructuring necessary? Peep this. Let's look at just the US Census, where race data is collected and it directly shapes funding, redraws political districts, and decide who gets what, where, and how. Since 1790, here's what we have for choices to identify as ourselves. Started with free white people, all other free persons, and slaves. Three groups. That's it. And only one utilized the skin color descriptor. Since then, deep breath. Free colored persons, mulatto, quadroon, octoroon, black, African American, Chinese, Indian, Asian, Pacific Islander, Mexican, Filipino, Hindu, Korean, American Indian, Vietnamese, Asian Indian, Guamanian, Samoan, Alaskan Native, Eskimo, Spanish, Hispanic or Latino, Middle Eastern or North African, Native Hawaiian, white, one or more races, and ultimately, because we truly have no fucking idea, other. Now, please pardon my language and the passion, but my head hurts saying those out loud because of the glaring contradictions of all of them. Now, they will tell you that this data, specifically for the census at least, is collected through self identification, so it is more acceptably accurate. Bullshit. For one, people were only allowed to start self identifying around 1970. And then, when they were, by only providing the allowed categories for people to choose from, you are still forcing people into a choice, into a box. Look, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not saying I can fix it, but I do know this: the data is broken, the labels are flawed, and the division is real. Select your race. Nah, it's a trick question, and the answer is always incomplete. I remember the first time I had to choose. I was a kid. The form said white, black, mulatto, other. So I picked other and I wrote in human. I got in trouble for that shit and I was forced to pick anyway. But I wasn't wrong then, and I'm damn sure not wrong now. Because shouldn't your decisions be made strictly on the fact that I am human to begin with? Now, I know the peanut gallery is probably warming up in the comments section, itching to troll, react emotionally, or throw shade. That's just the world we live in. Plus, I know how easy it is for you to chase clicks and find more fearful sheep willing to ride with you. You know, comfort in numbers. See, when people are asked to confront what they believe, when they're challenged to fact check their own conditioning, it's way easier to rage and lash out than it is to admit you've been lied to, or worse, that you've been loyal to that lie. And yeah, I already hear the spin. Oh, so now dude's saying we shouldn't be proud of our culture. Let me kill that noise right there. First off, hate's not new to me. It doesn't phase me, and it damn sure doesn't change my truth. Your anger is your weight to carry. It won't take up space in my head, my heart, or my message. Second, no, I'm not telling anyone to abandon their pride. I'm telling you that culture, real culture, isn't chained to skin tone. Now, that might be hard to hear if your entire identity was built on a checkbox, but facts don't need permission to exist. But what I am definitely saying, unequivocally, my identity is not and never will be limited by a label that has no genetic basis and has been chosen for me by the artificial and ever changing flavor of the month, by the cultural invention merely used for human classification. You don't believe me? Take a DNA test. Watch the multitude of hodgepodge that truly makes up your identity. Guaranteed you get a surprise. And probably you too will need to choose other going forward. So it's time. Final field assignment. Who are you outside your designated label? Are you truly committed to placing yourself into a box so you can possibly have some sense of pride based on a socially constructed concept of belonging? Be honest. Have you really bought into the idea that skin color means you automatically belong with some people and must clash with others? That only because someone looks like you, you're supposed to ride with them? And if they don't look like you, you're supposed to tool up? Perhaps it's time we stop checking boxes and start checking ourselves. We're not born with labels, we're branded with them. And then we're groomed to accept them and to identify with them. It was also Malcolm X who said, a blanket indictment of all white people is just as wrong when whites make a blanket indictment against blacks. Translation: anytime we reduce people to their skin color, their label, we forfeit truth for tribalism and we build walls. Keeps the game rigged because, regardless of intention, herd mentality breeds division, not unity. But here's our real flex: we don't have to keep answering to the labels they provide us. We don't have to keep playing the part scripted for us. We get to choose who we are, not by category, not by color, but by character, by consciousness, and by truth. And that's our real identity. So, closing arguments. So, as I like to do, let me leave you with one last quote. I don't know who said it or where I first read it, but it hits different. It says, "We are all one." It's not just a slogan, it's the absolute truth. We are all connected. So let's act like it. Let's stop letting an invented system tell us who to fear, who to follow, and who to fight. Because unity ain't soft. It's not kumbaya and community outreach. Unity is war against the lasting lie, the lie we tell ourselves that we're not already family. This is internal affairs of the mind. And if you felt that, perfect. Now don't just feel it, interrogate it, reflect on it, and then act on it. This has been Internal Affairs of the Mind, where we break in, strip it down, and get real. So hopefully together, we can build ourselves back up armed with wisdom. Peace and blessings to everyone. Be kind, be a good human. Thanks for listening. I'm Greg Thompson, and we'll chop it up next time.